There's a lot of talk about living longer, but what if we're missing the real goal? In this episode of the AgeTech podcast, Dr. Kerry Burnight, gerontologist and author of JoySpan, joins me to unpack the science of joy. Kerry, welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here, Keren. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining. I wanted to have you ever since I got my hands on this book. And I have to tell you, after reading it and rereading it, I love that it's not only inspiring, but also very actionable. So I guess my first question is, what inspired you to write it?
I started my career in gerontology 30 years ago, and it was focused exclusively on people who had endured incredible suffering. So, my partner and I opened the nation in the US, the first elder abuse forensic center. And there we worked with people who had endured physical abuse, psychological abuse, neglect, self neglect, and financial exploitation. People who really were alone and slumped over in wheelchairs. And the suffering really burned my eyes. And there was a point, and I did that for, I would say, 13 or 14 years and crying on my way home from work. And I had this sort of epiphany on an airplane, as one seems to when they're up in the air, that although it was important and needed to help people after they had gone through these bad situations, wouldn't it be so much better if we could get to people earlier before the suffering endured? And when you look in the academic research literature from all over the world, there were clues about things that would fortify people internally as well as externally in order to step into longevity ready to be the strongest, safest, most vital, proactive version of themselves. And so when the plane landed that day, I thought, okay, it's time to move away from this part of my career, which I have loved, and into this unknown about trying to look at what predicts quality of long life. And that prompted the word joy span. So, lifespan, how many years you live matters. And we're all trying to maximize that. And then more recently, we have used the word health span, how long you live enjoying good health. That matters. We're all certainly hoping to really maximize our lifespan. But what I found in working with thousands of people was that a long life, even a long life in good health, didn't mean much if you didn't like your life. So that's what prompted me to think about joy span. And the word joy, I think, is good to define right from the outset, because what I am not talking about is be all the time or some kind of ecstasy. And I'm certainly against toxic positivity, and that is downplaying the very real, hard parts of life that every single person endures. But joy, when you define it according to the Psychological Association definition, was defined as well being and satisfaction. And that I think we do have the right to strive for. So, joy span is the quality of your long life. And what I'm so happy to talk to you about today is what are the elements that we should be practicing in order to maximize the quality of our long lives?
Yes, what are those elements? You have the Joyce matrix in the book, and you also have it for people that everyone knows, like Maya Angelou, and you analyze their Joyce pen matrix, which I love. Can you explain this concept a little bit?
Yes. So a matrix is something that is made up of elements. And so when I first was digging into this years ago, I was overwhelmed because the literature has thousands of variables of things that there was generosity, there was grit, there was humor, there was just gratitude. There were so many things. And I was like, how can I do 1,000 things to focus on? Happily, when you dig into it, and they do group in 4 areas. And so 4 we can handle. And there are 4 elements. And I'd like to start out thinking about the physical part of it. Okay, so physically, with our bodies, we know that there are 4 elements of physical strength or physical fitness. That is cardiovascular, strength, flexibility, and agility. So within those 4 categories, we each day and as early as possible start working on those little steps forward to improve our flexibility, to improve our ability to lift heavy things. Okay, now we move that same thought to our internal strength, our internal fitness. And there are 4 things in that. And I'll go through the 4 first before we get into them. They are grow, connect, adapt, and give. And each of these could have been phrased, for example, growth, but I made them intentionally to be a verb because they all take work. And when I have patients who are enjoying a great quality of life and longevity, other people will point to them and think, oh, they're just so lucky. Those are great genetics. That's just lucky, lucky. But the research shows us that it's less than 25% genetic. And that's why it's good news. We have an opportunity to get in there and make small choices every day that are going to put us on a better path. So to get back to the matrix of these 4 things, the first G is grow. When we're younger, we are constantly afforded and pushed opportunities to grow and step out of our comfort zone. So we say to our kids, get up on the diving board and jump into the pool. Okay, now go and try and do this thing in front of the class that you've never done before and learn mathematics. And yet, as we get older, sometimes we are giving ourselves this, like, well, I guess that ship has sailed. I don't need to try anything new, or it's too late for me. And that's really damaging to our brains and to our ability to keep intellectually stimulated, which then the body follows when you have something that you're pursuing. And so I think of it as encouraging yourself every day to do hard things and to ask yourself, in what area am I growing right now? And if you're listening and you're thinking, oh, I don't really have something that I'm growing in right now, not to worry. It is a constant kind of step forward. And then the first step is curiosity. So thinking about, what am I curious about? And in the book, I list about 100 different things, but there are probably millions of things that we could be curious about. A patient I was working with recently said, I'm bored. I am not growing. I have done all the things that were on my bucket list, and I feel stagnant. And so I said, step 1 is just recognizing it. Good. And step 2 is thinking, what are you curious about? So he really dug into a lot of different areas. And in his case, he was quite curious about crypto because he'd been hearing about it on the news and didn't know, like, is this something good? Is this something ridiculous? What is going on? So he really dug in, and then he found other people who were interested in this. And in addition to a group that was already existing, he created a group, had men and women come over to his house, get together, have these conversations, talk about it. And it really, I saw in him this spark that had been missing. And so step 1, grow, supported in the literature and something that we can each do. And it doesn't have to be big. It can be some little something of I, for example, have a piano in my house and I don't know how to play piano. So I do always think when I walk by, there's your right there, girl. Sit down and try to learn a bit. I haven't yet, but I assure you that I will. So let's get to the second one. We've done grow. The second is connect. Most listeners are probably already really familiar with all the information that shows us how beneficial human connection is and how harmful loneliness is. So there's that great statistic that shows us that those who identify as who would say, I feel lonely, as we all do sometimes, it's the same as smoking 14 cigarettes a day. So it matters. And the definition of loneliness is important here too. To be lonely is to wish you had more social interaction than you currently have. So you can be lonely with your partner in a room full of people. Conversely, you can be not lonely by yourself. So I'm not talking about just proximity to people. And everybody has a different threshold. But if you, while you're listening right now, think, I'd like a little more social interaction, good. That, again, is identifying this is something that is going to make a difference in my longevity. In fact, some studies show that it's the most important predictor in the quality of your long life. And if you are like me, there are times where you think, I'm not really terribly close with anyone right now. I've gotten into my work or my raising my children, and I've fallen off the close friendship. That is normal. But it also then takes work to get back into a proactive approach to human connection. And the way to do that is what I call be that friend. And that friend is the friend who picks up the phone to call to make a lunch date, who texts and says, I remember that you were going to have a blood test on this or that. How did that go? Sends a card on an anniversary or maybe on the anniversary of your mother's passing, right? It takes, so anytime a patient comes to me and says, nobody reaches out to me, I have nothing to look forward to, I'm just really by myself and alone, I listen carefully because that's the kind thing to do. But then afterwards, I ask the same question. Tell me about all your outreach efforts to other people. And invariably they say, oh, well, I'm not really the one who reaches out. Like, ding, ding, there it is. We each need to be the one who reaches out. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. And sometimes it's kissing a lot of frogs until you find the one. And so I have another patient who she is on her own after the death of her husband. Her kids all live far away. She has vision impairment, so she isn't driving. So there's a lot of reasons why it's difficult to connect. So when she identified that she would like more social interaction, we put together a plan where right next door, there was a young mother who was a single mother who had 4 children. And I said, what if you went over there and around dinner time and to say, when you're making dinner, is it possible that it would be helpful me to entertain any of the kids or even hold any of the kids? And she went over there, and it takes some bravery to do. And this mother said, no, thank you. And so my patient was like, oh, gosh, that kind of hurt. But okay, yeah, no worries. Just thought I'd check. So what was different is that she didn't give up. She then went, and a few houses down, there was a married couple who she asked the same question to. And the husband, who was the one who stayed home, he said, I'd love nothing more because my wife works late and I'm doing the cooking and the kids always want my attention. It's like you've manifested my dream of someone to help me out during this time. But if she had given up on the first try, so little tiny interactions, like asking the name of the person who is serving you your coffee at the coffee shop or at the supermarket, thinking about a friend that you had cared about that you lost contact with, maybe out of the blue saying, "Hello, Sam. It's been 20 years. I you popped in my mind and I wanted to see how you were doing," right? Like a really proactive approach to connection. Okay, so we've done grow, we've done connect. Now we're on the A, which is adapt. Sometimes people will say to me, "Well, I just want to age gracefully." And I must say, I, as a gerontologist, haven't known anyone who has aged gracefully, because growing older is not a particularly graceful thing. Being a human is not always very graceful. So if we're honest with ourselves, we are going to have changes. We're going to have challenges. And ultimately, the end for all of us is the same, which is not a bad thing. So when I teach my undergraduate courses, I always say, let's start with mortality. And then I show behind me a big circle, and it's all the way filled in red. It's 100% mortality rate. So we're not, with all this longevity craze, sometimes people, I think, act like if I just do all these things, I'm somehow not going to get old and not die. And that never works. So along the way, you're going to have physical changes and challenges, an unwanted diagnosis, the loss of friends and our partners. It's going to be either ourselves or our partners who pass away. And because of this, it matters that we are able to adapt. So a big differentiator is, can we cope with these very real, hard, often heartbreaking challenges? Happily, there is a literature about adapting. And in fact, it is two professors in Israel who came up with the adaptation scale that I used in the book. And I admire their work so much. And then when we look at coping, there's both internal coping mechanisms and external coping mechanisms that we can consciously employ and try. And so in the book, I have a checklist of different things we could try. And I'll just give you one example. It's a more internal, and it's the fancy term, cognitive behavioral therapy. But what it is, the most simple, practical way of, when a thought comes in, like, I can't be happy again, I can't experience joy because the love of my life has passed away. With cognitive behavioral therapy, you can, within your mind, replace that thought with another thought is, Kerry, I hear you, but can you imagine that you can still experience nature or reach out to someone or enjoy your sip of coffee, even in this grief of losing your husband? And that change in thinking over time, we have tens of thousands of thoughts per day. And by replacing some of these thoughts, not by denying the grief, but what does really break my heart is that a lot of times people have 20 years after the death of their partner, and those years either are going to be daily suffering, or that person's going to think, I'm going to honor that person by still trying to use this time of my life in a way that I can still experience the joy, because I think our loved ones would want that for us. So we've done grow, we've done connect, we've done adapt, and that brings us to the final G, which is giving. And give is my favorite one. It ties to the powerful research on purpose. So a researcher at UCLA named Stephen Cole did a study looking at the epigenetic gene expression. So I think of genes like a piano key. So it's a question of, you can have a gene, but whether it's going to be pressed down. expressed. And he put in quite a few variables to predict inflammation and antiviral load. And it was all the variables that you would expect: health habits, um, diet, sleep. But he also put in a question of, do you feel like your life has purpose? And I don't think he was thinking that was going to, and that was not his particularly main thing. But when the results came back with all these variables held constant, purpose was a powerful predictor of epigenetic expression as shown in inflammation and antiviral load. And even he was surprised. And when I first heard about it, it was in the New York Times as opposed to the academic journal. So I read the article and thought, purpose, aha. I thought so, just anecdotally from my patients. And so then I went and looked up the academic article, and it inspired me to think, if this was a medication, we would be clamoring for it, or if an injection, we would think, and yet, so let's talk about purpose, because it can be a little like, oh, capital P purpose, I need to solve cancer or something like that. But purpose is usually small, and it's not just one, but it can, when you think of it as giving, it's how can you find a way to give of yourself? And happily, as we get older, there's a lot of things that get better. They're never publicized because fear makes money. This anti-aging industry is like fed by fear. But this other non-lucrative message that is true from the research is that things get better as you get older. For example, you don't care as much what people think about you. I'm only 56 and I'm already starting to get this wonderful benefit, and it is glorious. Can't wait to be 86, 96, and 106. We also have the potential for greater problem solving. So as a result of both the neurological integration of our left and right hemisphere, coupled with a lifetime of solving problems, as we grow older, we have the potential of having different ways of thinking about and solving problems. Wow, that's what the world needs. But if we don't recognize it in ourselves, or we're too beaten down by ageism to step into it, then we're not willing to contribute it. So I want people to recognize what they have and then offer it. Okay, back to what gets better as you get older. There is greater emotional stability, so not such big ups and downs, greater potential for deeper, richer spirituality, appreciation of nature and music and art, and appreciation of our friendships, greater acceptance. And here's a biggie that the world needs now: humility. That ability to not be me, ego first, but to really think about, like, what is the greater good. So recognizing that older you possesses these strengths that the world needs, then purpose and giving is about then figuring out how to offer these things. And so, like, a tiny would be, let's say you look in your backyard that there are lemons, pick the lemon, bring them over to somebody that tiny, right? That's not a earth-shattering thing. And yet, what a difference that can make, because you then get a good feeling, that giver's high. The person thinks, wow, thank you for these lemons. And you do that over and over, and it's like weightlifting. It's not one little weight lift that makes you strong. Is that over and over each day, thinking about how can I give? And people almost get thinking of their give of the day. And those are the people who are thriving in longevity. So we don't point to them and think, oh, it's only what you eat or your exercise or your lucky genes. It's those little daily choices.
That is an excellent recap of the Joyspan matrix. And one of the things that took me by surprise is how much, like you have a chapter about the twins, of how much of it is choice, right? Because we tend to think that the genes that you're born with and maybe your epigenetics and your life choices, that all accumulates, and at a certain point you don't have any choice in the matter of how well you're going to grow old. So what does the science say on how your joy span impacts your lifespan and your health span? I mean, at what point is it too late, if at all?
I love that question because a lot of people think it's too late or they think it's too late for their parents. I keep running into people who say, I read your book. I love it. I'm doing it. Too bad it's too late for my parents. And I say, wait, tell me more about that. And then they say all these awful things about their parents that are not rooted in the truth. So, again, if you look at physical exercise, I don't think you would ever say it's too early to start. And I don't think you would ever say it's too late to start because things that benefit, things that the research show builds our psychological well-being, it isn't ever too early or too late. And like we said, these are small incremental things. And people then would say, well, what about the fact that I'm living with a cancer diagnosis? I'm living with a really disadvantaged um, economic situation that leaves me very worried about how I'm going to pay for my medications or my food for that matter. So, in these very hard situations, it matters even more that we feel the agency, that we, regardless of these very real hard situations, have choice in how we respond. And that's not new. That is the oldest wisdom in the book. And in my book, I write about Viktor Frankl, and that he said, regardless, I can maintain spiritual freedom. And so I think even with, I have a patient living with ALS, that's a big, heavy, hard, terminal condition. And yet I watch her maintain the choice in the little ways that she savors a piece of fruit or laughs with her daughter. It's moving to me because it reminds me that regardless of our external circumstances, we do have control over our internal responses, not because it's easy, but because it's important. And the legacy that people leave behind, the legacy that you will leave behind, is how you stepped into the challenge of your life. And I was going to say long life, but in the case of the woman I'm talking about, she's not very old. So it's not going to be a long life. But these principles I watch in her. So I'm really watching in her ability to continue to be interested, to continue to grow, to connect with other humans, to adapt to the fact that almost daily there are hard changes that of things that she can't do, and then giving, like leaving her legacy by showing us how to stand in an intentional way during what to some people would be imaginable suffering,
Absolutely.
unimaginable. Yeah.
Absolutely, and it's saturation. You have multiple examples in the people like bouncing back from difficult situations, and I love that you also provide like these little checklists, and really people can, when they finish the book, they can really have an action plan for improving their joy span, which I absolutely loved about this. You also mentioned Brian Johnson in the book, which is someone who I've been following online. I think he's doing. He's very interesting for those of you who may not be familiar. He's a very wealthy tech billionaire, I think, who has decided that he is not going to die or grow old. And it's very interesting to see all the things that he does physically. He's really like experimenting on himself. And one of the things that I assume you'll agree with me on is that he seems to be not putting enough emphasis on all on like the joy span of life. So what advice would you give to all these biohackers who are doing everything they can? They're ticking all the boxes on health and physical wellness. What do they need to do to improve their joy span?
I would argue that joy matters, that moments of gratitude and being fully present and that feeling of throwing your head back and laughing or watching a sunset, there's a lot to it. And so far, nobody has ever succeeded in not dying. And I also sometimes think, have people really thought it through that do we want to just keep living and living? Because there would be so very many of us. And I I think about the chronic conditions that we would be having and also the resources. So I sometimes wonder a little like, have you really thought it through? Everybody's going to do their own. And of course, I appreciate and admire his dedication, Brian Johnson, to being a human guinea pig. When I listen to him, he says that he spends about 6 hours a day doing these kinds of things. He doesn't sleep in the same bed with anybody else because it might impact his sleep. I'm, from my perspective, it just seems like, huh, I would bet money that you were still going to grow old and die. And then the question will be like, did you use it in a way that you wanted to? And maybe that biohackers would say, yes, I wanted to use all my time to try to do something that I didn't succeed in because it's impossible. But for the most of us, I think that we would agree that the quality of our life matters and that while, yes, let's do some of the things that enable us to try to maximize our health span, it is also important to think, like somebody will say to me, I don't know if I should have a little piece of chocolate after dinner. And I say, I think you should. I think you should.
Thank
I
you.
think, and then a lot of this is some good news. The research shows that the same things that increase the length of your life, your lifespan, and the length of your healthy life, your health span, are also the same things that increase your joy span. So they do generally go in the same direction. So connection with other people enables you to live longer in better health, and it's more enjoyable. So those are all wins. We're lucky about that because it isn't. So some people will say to me, well, the only thing that really makes me happy is indulgent eating and indulgent drinking and drinking so much. And so that when a patient would say that to me, we just untangle it. Like, let's get into it. Let's talk about what you want to eat and the feelings that gives you. And a lot of times I'm not talking about people who are drinking a little. This is people who really want to drink a whole bunch. When we get into it, sometimes we disentangle it. And those were mechanisms to get to connection and fun and relaxation. And we can go, love those. What if we went a different route to those? So I think for the most part, they're compatible and not mutually exclusive. And that when you find, like an example that I give a lot in the book is my own 96-year-old mother. And she's a person who was never an athlete. She didn't have a perfect diet. She had some dessert and had a cocktail with her husband when my dad was alive. But how in the world then did she outlive everybody so much? And I think she started practicing these intentional choices, these joy span approach years and years ago, way before the book was in existence, because as I would learn these things, I would say, Mom, did you know that if you continue to grow, it will keep you cognitively stimulated? And so she was, I'm not taking all the credit for her. She'd take the credit for herself, but she did implement a lot of this stuff. And so watching the fact that it's possible. So I started sharing her on Instagram at this account at the_gerontologist. And what I have found is that millions of people all over the world have been hungry for role models, for examples. And what I've also learned is that there are millions of people who are enjoying long joy spans. And you don't have to be a quote like super ager, and you don't have to be water skiing at age 100. And you certainly don't have to look young. I think sometimes our society gets so tangled in this putting together young and looking good. You can look good at every age, but you don't need to look young. I have some incredible people in my life who are in their 90s and 100s, and they look old and they look so good. And so it feels very liberating to think, I have been young. I still want to look good, and that's different for all of us. Maybe that means some bright lipstick and some fun glasses, or maybe a neat, crazy hair kind of thing, or whatever is your authentic you, or maybe it's none of that. But that radiance of stepping into your self-acceptance is what makes people so attractive. Whereas this holding on to what was behind you and trying to hold on to youth, I think that isn't as attractive and it doesn't feel as good. So I think we have a long way to go to examine our mindset around aging. And when a thought comes in your mind, like, oh, look at all those chins, like when you're looking down at your phone, I'll demonstrate it. Then to tell yourself, of course, I'm going to have those. That's how your neck bends when you get into older ages. And to replace our thoughts. So when you can't remember where you parked your car and your mind goes, oh no, I'm having a senior moment, I'm really losing it. To then again say to yourself, I didn't remember where my car was back in my 20s. That's what humans do. Sometimes we don't remember things. And to proactively stop the powerful messaging, this internalized ageism. There's a study at Yale showing those who held positive age beliefs, like that age is a time of continued growth and value of yourself, lived 7.5 years longer than those who endorsed negative age beliefs that everything is decline. So those thoughts matter. And even like we don't need to do those birthday cards anymore. And we don't need to be making fun of ourselves or criticizing ourselves. And especially when you look in the mirror in the morning, again, just when a thought goes, oh no, my eyes are puffy and they're wrinkled. And say, right, I'm seeing right through that. Let's go. Let's smile. Who cares about that? And like moving on. I think those are the people that are such a inspiration to be around, as opposed to the people who feel so bad about the fact that they're doing what is natural, which is growing older.
Absolutely. And I think working on that mindset has to be one of the hardest things in our ageist society because we keep getting bombarded with messages telling us that aging is wrong and wrinkles is wrong and gray hair is wrong. And we have to really be mindful to not let that muddy our consciousness because that ends up hurting us in the long term, all of
You
us.
are exactly right. And I think about how not so very long ago, women didn't have a vote because there was this erroneous messaging that somehow women were less than. And now I think, can we move toward a day that we'll look back and think we used to be so ridiculous about growing older? but we stepped into it. And I don't think it's going to come from others. I think it's going to come from each of us accepting ourselves and putting in the work to show subsequent generations that we're not sorry. When people say, oh, they'll say to my mom, you don't even look that age. My mom is starting to say, for me, this is how it looks. I'm not trying to be anything other than the age that I am. When people say, like, you look good for your age, there's no reason to say that. We can choose to make it different than it was in the past, because the way that we were doing it, of this self-loathing and clinging to youth, it didn't work for us. It's not healthy. The only thing that it does is it puts a lot of billions and billions of dollars into the pockets of other people to keep making you feel bad about yourself. I've had times where I was falling prey to it, as we do. And there was a day where I was, okay, I need to make my teeth whiter, my hair a different color, my skin a different color. I was thinking, what are you doing? You're covering up all the stuff that you are in order to what? In order to, you're not fooling anybody. Nobody's fooling anyone. But by stepping into, like, this is 82, bring it on, then now we're talking.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that when you become a mother, that sort of even becomes even more important, because you do want to set an example. So you have to really work on self-acceptance and being a positive role model, especially if you have daughters.
It's absolutely so true, because they are watching, and at every stage. So I am watching my mom navigate her 90s and learning what works and what doesn't work. And my kids, who are all now adults, are watching me as well. And if sometimes something's going to come out of my mouth that is critical to myself, it is up to me to absolutely stop that.
Exactly. And we should consider ourselves lucky that we have 90-year-old role models in our lives, because previous generations just didn't have that.
Yes, absolutely. And none of us knows how much time we have. So that's all the more reason, because this could be our last day, or our last day could be in 50 years. So that's all the more reason to, like, really squeeze the joy out of it, and set ourselves up for how we can access psychological well-being even in challenging times, and especially in challenging times.
Absolutely. Well, if there's one or actually two things I'd like to take from this conversation, is that you have a choice in your own well-being and in your own lifespan and joy span, and also that you can and should have that chocolate as dessert for dinner.
Yes. I'm glad you're absolutely. And I'm grateful for your time, and I'm grateful for all the work that you have done in this field and internationally, in order to position people to create their own path to longevity, in order to change it. Not because it's not hard. It is hard, I promise you. But because it is hard, to really step into it and to come up with solutions, as you have led the way in, of solutions on how we can embrace this unprecedented time. We have never had so many older people in the history of humanity, and we are making it up as we go, and we're making it as good or as bad as our effort. And the work that you've done is really making a difference.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kerry. Thank you for writing this book. I absolutely enjoyed it. And I do think that anyone who can read should read it. I mean, if you're starting to read at 6, read it once and then do it again at 16 and at 26. At any point in life, you'll gain something out of it. So thank you so much. And thank you for joining me on the podcast.
I'm so grateful. Thank you, Keren.
If you enjoyed this conversation, there's another one YouTube things you might like right here. Until next time, stay humble, stay curious.